have a frozen conflict, which is already 30 years old. How do you see, what are the prospects for it?
Alright, so Karabakh is one of the frozen conflicts, which is thawing once in a while. And I don't see how it could remain at the same time stable, and how it could be at the same time won militarily. So on the one hand, I defer to the military experts. So what could be the way out of this impasse? On the other hand, let me just focus on the environment, on the international environment, where I see great unknowns. The Southern Caucasus is surrounded by three regional powers. That is Iran, Turkey and Russia. All three are experiencing great challenges, to put it mildly, at the present. Which adds a lot of unpredictability to the situation in Karabakh. Iran is fighting for its survival. The question which is usually posited regarding the Islamic Republic in the West puts it in a dichotomy. Is it moving towards more authoritarian regime or more democratic? I think this is a wrong dichotomy, like majority of dichotomies. The actual dilemma for the Islamic Republic is getting out of the war mode in which it had existed almost from the outset, or disintegration of the country. So it's very much like the Soviet Union. It was not so much the question whether the Soviet Union was going to become democratic or more authoritarian. It was whether the Soviet Union was going to survive at all. The Islamic Republic exists today because from the outset it was shaped by the attack from Saddam Hussein's Iraq. It survived a major war, and it survived it very much like the Soviet Union in the Second World War. So the Islamic Republic is not so much Islamic as it is a guerrilla state emerging from the Iran-Iraqi war. Most of the political and social structures, the identity of the country is shaped primarily there. So the question is whether the current expansion of Iranian geopolitical ambitions in the Middle East, expansion into the vacuum created by the failure of the United States in Iraq, and now the war in Syria, doesn't seem to be sustainable in the longer run. So Iran is trying to live out its dream of spreading the revolution, which brings a lot of counter pressure from the Gulf monarchies, from the United States, from Israel. So we are somewhere here in the Southern Caucasus, we are somewhere at the periphery of this great conflict, but we must not forget that this is what is going to define the region in the coming years. On the other hand, of course, there is Russia, which is also at conflict with almost entirely the core of the capitalist world system. It is capitalist Russia now. It is not a socialist Soviet Union, but it is oligarchic and now militaristic Russia, which is trying to upgrade its position in the world system to bring back at least some of the positions lost after the dissolution of Soviet Union by pursuing what I would call a daring foreign policy. It is mostly daring, and so far it paid off in Syria, but very much like with Iranian ambitions, can it be sustainable in the longer run? Let me just mention the conflict in Ukraine, which is not going anywhere, which is creating a huge pressure, psychological and financial, on Russia, coupled with all the problems, economic problems that have accumulated not just from the Soviet period. Those problems were mostly removed with the dissolution of Soviet economy, but the new kind of problems, such as social inequality in Russia, lack of growth, and the enormous extractive apparatus, which is Vladimir Putin's state. And then Turkey, where the model of 20th century Turkey had been all but undone in first the reforms of Tayyip Erdogan, and then especially in the aftermath of the coup attempt of 2016. What was undone is not just the Kemalism, but the whole elite which was associated with the secular and, let me remind you, highly inegalitarian model of Turkish Republic. The core, the backbone of that model was, of course, the army. It's one of the biggest armies, the army which was prudently never used during the existence of Turkish Republic, except the very beginning of the Republic, the so-called Turkish War of Independence, and later, kind of relatively minor episode, the participation of Turkey in the Korean War. Turkey is beginning to participate in regional conflicts. I mean Syria primarily, and of course the huge challenge of the Kurdish insurgency, which is not going away. At the same time, after all the political events in Turkey, to put it mildly, we call them events, the question is not only of the loyalty of Turkish army, how loyal are the remaining officers to Erdogan's regime, but simply of their professionalism. The people who are familiar with Soviet history mostly compare it to the depredations of 1937 Great Terror, which Stalin launched against its own military. Yes, probably it comes, to that scale, if not in the extermination, direct extermination, but at least in the turnover in the elites. So we have these three unknowns: Iran, Turkey, and Russia. And the last unknown is Azerbaijan itself. Armenia, actually, since the revolution this year, is relatively known. Azerbaijan is greater unknown, because, let me just conclude very briefly on this. When I look at Azerbaijan, I cannot help feeling that I'm looking at Iran, but not today, of the 1960s. That this is Shah's Iran. An oil state with dynastic ruling elite, with enormous discrepancies between the rich and poor, with extremely ambitious and showing off modernization aspirations. And if that is going to implode, I doubt that it will be a liberal revolution of any kind, or democratic revolution. And also, who would be able to unite to direct the blow would be either the Islamists, or there will be no direction. Again, so we can see an implosion of state, sudden, and that will be always very sudden. Which is why I see actually a prospect of the of Karabakh normalization. It could be very sudden, because after 30 years of trying to overcome the Armenian challenge, primarily by violent and military means, Ilham Aliyev might suddenly change the game and become a peacemaker. It might be to his own benefit, but it remains to be seen, what is going on there.